Hello and welcome to the show. I am here on Forza 6 with a challenge, as today we take the Ford Fiesta XR2, a classic and a rather fantastic hot hatch. However, this is not an ordinary one. This has a setup applied to it that pretty much whenever you touch the brakes causes the car to do a front flip. Now that is a rather peculiar thing, and we were expecting a really rather spectacular sight as we headed down towards turn 1 in the first race at the Catalonian National Circuit, and sure enough it didn't disappoint as many front flipping Fiestas. I can't decide if it's a sillier sight, that one, than with the wheelie Fiat when they all kind of launch off the line. I can't decide whether the Fiesta's front flipping down there is sillier than the Fiat's. Either way though, it is one hell of a sight. Amazingly, we all kind of were in a cluster as we come through the next corner, despite many cars tumbling through there. We had the damage on cosmetic because, well, everyone was going to front flip at some point during this. Yeah, we all kind of stayed together in a rather large group. I escaped the track, having troubles getting stopped up here. And yeah, the first lap was, as you could imagine, rather hectic as people were trying to get the hang of the cars. And, well, the hairpin was the next big braking zone, and sure enough, some more cars go for a synchronized triple front flip between the pair of them. And the thing I love the most about this is they both land and they both continue the race, and the yellow car gets an overtake. It's kind of like a normal race, except for the addition of some front flips in the braking zones. It was kind of a cleanish overtake. I don't think they bumped into one another. They kind of just tumbled through the air, but they didn't bump into one another. And yeah, they continued to race. Some people were getting the hang of the cars quicker than others. The Fiestas were, well, the way that they were made to do the front flip also makes them quite a difficult car to drive, so you'll see that a lot of oversteer sliding between the vehicles. Now is the battle of who dare brake latest as they come down towards turn 1. Both of the cars sort of wiggling, and they're kind of just about trying to front flip. They did a great job of keeping those two under control there. As cars in the background, you can see, were doing a good job. I will be honest, that on the replays, the way the cars kind of tip up looks a little bit unnatural. That's just a slightly laggy replay. That's they looked a lot more normal, as normal as a front flipping Fiesta can be in the context of a race. While I was coming down to this first stop on the first flying lap, I didn't quite get things as right. The car behind me got even more of a spectacular flip, tumbling around. I do a perfect front flip, land pointing the correct direction, and actually get an overtake as the purple car was having some problems out wide. I mean, that is one way to slow down. If you could get the vehicle to do the perfect front flips, you could kind of use it to your advantage. It's not really ideal, but yeah, it was certainly tough to get things right with these cars. Again, people were continuing to have issues. There were some spectacular rolls as everyone was trying different things to help get cars slowed down. The most impressive thing I found was the way just everything kept on racing. It didn't matter what happened in the braking zone. As soon as you could, you would carry on racing. This car gets to the inside of his fellow white Fiesta to try and get the pass done. Car on the outside is having all manner of issues, which is not surprising considering the difficulty of driving these cars. Yeah, it's not just the brakes that were a problem. With these, trying to get them through the corners was an interesting experience with their twitchiness and their oversteeriness. The car we're on board with runs wide coming out of the chicane. The car ahead of him has no turning coming into the final corner. Somebody tried to have a go at the inside, thought better of it, and all in all, not very much changed over the course of that lap. Despite people having offs and there being many flips involved, it kind of all just about remained the same at the front, and the lead three were really pulling away from the rest of the field. But we're coming down towards this first corner again. Very easy to get caught out as the black car does a 180 over the top of the leader. Now, it's not very often you say that in a race, but there we go. It was, yeah, he managed to control it. He stopped it from doing a flip, and this was something that you were seeing. It was kind of better to sort of throw the car sideways so that it wouldn't do a front flip. Still not really ideal. I was trying to find a way of braking them controllably. The car behind me didn't. Goes to one of the most spectacular crashes of the evening as it bounces and rolls and somehow jumps across the top of my car. That was an interesting experience, certainly, to be underneath as the car twists and flips. I managed to kind of get mine under control-ish down there that time out, but yeah, it wasn't easy. The leaders were having trouble as well. This red car leading the race just uses that little bit too much brake, and the speeds that they were taking down there, the red car goes for a mighty twist as well. Yeah, if you were sort of full racing speed down there and you got it a little bit wrong, the car would kind of bounce back up into the air, get a big launch. The black Fiesta's doing the exact same thing he did a lap earlier with the 180 down towards turn 1. I struggled with these cars. I was kind of in and around the fight for the sort of around the top 10, the lower parts of the top 10. I was trying all sorts of techniques to try and get the car to slow down and was having issues. I did get a cleanish overtake in one of the few cleanish overtakes around the outside of turn 1. Almost get to the inside. Well, I kind of get to the inside of turn 2. When I go on the brakes, my car lifts up and sort of forces me across the grass, so there was a little bit of a bump, but it was kind of a clean overtake, and it needn't really have bothered. The white car then goes for a front flip at the top of the hill, the purple car's off in the grass, and well, I make up some positions in all of that. Yeah, these are seriously tough vehicles to drive. Second place would go for a big roll on the final lap and land on the roof of the third place car. I mean, that's one way to defend, to block your opponents from overtaking, but the blue vehicle would move up and get the position. Yeah, that was, again, there was a lot of spectacular rolls, especially towards the end of this race. At the front, and our leader would have a relatively large safety margin to the vehicles behind. It was all about trying to learn how to slow these cars down as quick as possible, really, in these racing situations. And you know, this driver did much better than the rest of us at figuring out a way of making these cars slow down. It wasn't about not going to full brake pressure. You had to, even if you used a tiny amount, the car would do a front flip. The only way I figured out, and I only learned it at the very end of the final race, at the end of this race at Monza, you have to tap the brakes. That's how you do it. Very, very quickly tap the brakes will work. We were still having issues at Monza, though. I went to Monza being about the meanest track that you could possibly go to. Huge braking zones around here, and sure enough, the first stop into turn 1 was always going to be chaos. A large number of cars tumbling over. More, though, did make it through. This time around, at this stage, I still hadn't quite learned how to slow these cars down, though. We're still trying to use as little brake pressure as I possibly could. As a black Fiesta goes sideways on the grass, not a good idea. It was just about working. I was kind of going for a slow and steady method at this stage of the race. Some cars... cars tumbling through shots. Yeah, I was going for a slow and steady race. It would make me quite slow into the corners, but even doing that wasn't a guarantee of getting the car stopped. But even by being really cautious, lifting out the throttle really early, it still only took a tiny little bit too much on the brakes, and you were off. It might not have been, it wasn't as spectacular. You might not do a front flip if you were being a bit carefuler, but you were still going to find yourself off the track, still going to find yourself in trouble. Cars were going for some nice early stops down here, and people were doing a better job this time out. We were seeing less of the big spectacular front flips. We were more seeing cars having issues with sort of the bouncing. So when they initially get on the brakes, the rear end of the car or the front sort of digging in, the rear end lifting up, and when it came back down again, it's bouncing. That is what was causing most of the issues on this second race. Although, having said that, as we come up towards the final turn, still a little bit too much on the brakes would cause some problems as, again, we get another synchronized flip. Not quite as synchronized as the Catalonia race, but still not bad as the cars have to try and recover. At the front, and I can't believe I'm going to say that about these cars, but there was a really rather good race going on between these two vehicles while they were both out of control and skidding the cars around. The black Fiesta was favouring the hold the handbrake technique to slow the car down, and while that wiggles the rear end, it can help get the vehicle slowed down. I think the red car was going for the frantically tap the brake to get it slowed down, that I would say is probably the best method with these. They're actually side by side through the first corner. Admittedly, the red car taking a little bit of a shortcut, but considering considering the vehicles we're in, we'll forgive him that as they both slide their way through the next turn. Then we've got another big braking zone coming up. Would anybody be brave enough to take a dive up the inside to try and get a position? The red car too far back, opting and not to just focus on their own braking, get the cars slowed down. They're sliding through the corner. Not quite works for the black car, not quite as fast, while third place goes for a big tumble. Everyone else was having issues and crashing, and these two guys had got the hang of them. And we're racing them side by side. The inside, the first of the Lesway, that is a great place. That's a great overtake in normal cars. Such a tough place to get overtakes done, yet alone in these vehicles. The red car dove to the inside. He got the pass done, but he ran wide through the next corner. Now comes the black car with the speed down this back straight up towards Ascari. These things have got turbo rally engines in them. They are not slow cars at all, but the main, of course, concern being the braking. Now down towards the Ascari. The black car's overdone it. Gets a big spin. Manages to boot it. Keeps his foot down. Doesn't go on the gravel trap. He loses the place, but yeah, that is one hell of an entry into Ascari. We did see some other techniques being used to try and slow the cars down. As I said, tapping the brakes works probably the best. The holding the handbrake to slow the rear down is scary and difficult because the rear will wiggle about, but it does kind of work. This red Fiesta was going for the change down into first and buzz the limiter. Because we were using cosmetic damage, you could get away with this. It wasn't going to blow the engine up as as unrealistic as that is, considering we've got front-flipping Fiestas, but you could change down into first, you could buzz the limiter. Yes, it would kind of work to slow the car down, and the red Fiesta was relatively controlled in these moments. It wasn't as fast as some of the other cars. If you could get the braking right, if you knew what you were doing with the brake pedal, you could get the car slowed down better, even with the crazy front flipping, by actually using the brakes. Buzzing the limiter sounds horrendous, and it did work to an extent, but it was a slower method. More controlled method, perhaps, yes, but even then you see coming down here, he had to go on the brakes as a kind of a panic last minute resort. Yeah, it did work to an extent, but it wasn't as quick as some other methods. If you could get control of the braking, and that really was a very much an if you could. The leaders, they were continuing their fight. I can't believe they were having this good of a race at the front of the field. The black car very, very sideways, the red car equally sideways, as they're both pushing it under brakes. In the end, the red car just overcooks it. He just held the brake trigger for just ever so slightly too long. It really has to be tiny taps if you want to get the car slowed down without what you see there, and it was just a fraction too long on the brake trigger was enough for the car to nosedive. Doesn't go for a roll, but the twist would dump him back down to second and put him too far down the order. As I said, with the opening race, the car doesn't have to be going very fast. You don't have to be using a huge amount of braking force and so on. It's just you hold that brake down for any length of time, and the car, even at the really slow speed, or relatively slow speeds this black car was going at, it was still going to want to lift up. The car's still going to want to switch ends on you and turn around in a circle. It was, yeah, awkward. Really tough one. Really, really tough one to try and learn to drive and just try and control around this circuit. We were seeing some kind of racing battles going on apart from the lead battle. These two are close together in almost identical cars, go for a big tandem drift. These are front-wheel drive. Big tandem drift from the incredibly oversteering, just the way the setup is on these cars to make them do these front flips makes them incredibly loose rear end around some of these corners. The white car we were following did a much better job of controlling the stop, whereas the two vehicles behind him both went for, well, one went for a front flip and one just kind of missed the corner really. Our leader, the black Fiesta, was to go on to take victory. The handbrake technique was working very, very well, just holding the handbrake pretty much throughout the braking zone and dabbing the main brakes to try and shrug off any speed that needed doing. Was working well for this Fiesta. In the end, they did have a great battle with the red car. However, come this final lap, he would put out a sizable margin to the vehicle behind and would go for a big front flip across the finish line. Yeah, they had a really good race. I was amazed to see such a close race at the front for a good 2-3 laps until that final lap there with them guys. It was yeah, that was some quite impressive stuff. I really struggled. I didn't do well with these cars. It's certainly an experience driving these and trying to race them, especially around other cars that suddenly just sort of front flip and tumble past you, over you, and so on. Yeah, was really rather entertaining. The tune for these cars can be found on LSR Foxy's storefront. I'll put the name in the description so you can search it up. Have a go, download these tunes, have a go at driving them yourself. It really is quite ridiculous trying to drive these Fiestas, but yeah, certainly makes for a rather big spectacle. Anyway, that is it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.